Hello, everybody. Pastor Andy here. Welcome to Making It Simple on this beautiful Wednesday. I hope that this finds you doing well today. Always excited to be with you to bring another discussion as we continue to look at the issues that still plague us right now and the understanding that these friends, these are not new. They've been around for a long time. One of the things that I wrestle with, and maybe many of you do as well, is when you know, and I don't mean speculate, I mean you know that the person that you're talking to, or the group for that fact that you're talking to, is not listening to you. Not only is it a measure of disrespect, but it also is another exposure of the heart. Now, we talked a lot about that yesterday, and in fact, over the last couple of days. The group that Jesus was speaking to clearly had no intentions of listening to anything that he said because their mind was made up. In fact, they got angry at every challenge that came their way. But as most conversations do, when you can pick up on the idea, and sometimes even clearly so, that the receiving party, if you will, is not listening. Again, whether it be out of disinterest or whether it be out of spite, regardless of the reason, it's very concerning because if you are making the effort to share something, you want someone to hear it. That's just human nature. Whether you're teaching a class, whether you're making a video, whether you're preaching a sermon, whether you're giving a speech, it doesn't really matter. We saw in the last couple of passages that we've gone through, Jesus really challenging these folks as to what the contents of their heart is. We talked yesterday about what is your source? Where does this come from? Where did you hear that? Who influenced you? What, we could go on and on and on. And so when he told them yesterday, if God were your father, the key word there being if, you wouldn't act like you do. Now, he had absolutely viable reason for speaking to them in this manner. He was not being condescending, wasn't being even judgmental. He was being factual. Because what he was saying was, you proclaim one thing, but what you say doesn't add up because you act nothing like that one which you claim to belong to. So then he goes on in the verses that we will cover today, or at least attempt to. And he says to them in verse 43, why do you not understand my speech? Now that was a valid question. Because he was like, I'm clear, I'm articulate, I'm biblical, scriptural, whatever way whatever way you want to define that. In other words, I know that what I'm giving you is truth. I know that what I'm giving you is accurate. And you don't have a rebuttal. You do not have anything that you can argue with me about in this context because, number one, you already said you knew. And number two, I know that you know. Because that's part of what you're supposed to be. You're supposed to know all of this stuff because you are the spiritual leaders of this time, of this era, of these people. You have to know. You have to have an answer. So your proclamations that you're giving of coming from Abraham, being of God, they don't hold up. Because nothing you do is showing that. Your words, your actions, nothing. And absolutely your attitude and your heart condition. So he says to them, why don't you understand what I'm saying? Even because you cannot hear my word. Now, what was he saying here? He's saying, you don't hear me, you don't understand because you refuse to listen. There's the problem. It's not because they couldn't hear him. Their hearing was just fine. It wasn't because he was speaking a different language or had some type of speech impediment. There was no issue from a physical, medical, or any other reason. It was a heart matter. They didn't hear him because they didn't want to. They didn't hear him because they refused to hear him. In other words, it's like the proverb, pride goes before destruction. My mind is made up. I'm digging my heels in, and nothing is going to change my mind. It sounds like a recipe for disaster, doesn't it? Why does this sound so familiar, Pastor Andy? Why does this sound like 2021? Because that's exactly what's going on in 2021. Friends, I cannot implore you enough, my listening audience, to open your eyes and open your ears. Read these passages. I don't know where everybody's status is with their relationship with God. I have no way to govern that, nor do I want to. That is personal. That is between you and the Lord and what you do or don't believe. But if you grasp the things that I'm teaching and the manner in which I do so, you would quickly see this is not a typical Bible study in the sense of doing it just for so, because we don't get in a hurry, or to somehow make you more religious or biblical. It's got nothing to do with either of those. This is about applying the scriptural context to modern life and how it still absolutely matters. In the process of doing that, we're then able to understand why a relationship with Christ is so important. So important because it allows you to be able to hear. It allows you to be able to see in ways that you've never seen before. You see, it's one thing, and I'll use my Grand Canyon example. I know I've used it before. I don't set out to be repetitive in one sense, but some illustrations or some pictures are just too good not to reuse. It is one thing to read about the Grand Canyon. It's one thing to even see a picture of the Grand Canyon. But it's an entirely different thing to witness it. It is an entirely different perception to stand on the rim and look at this unbelievable creation. Because then we see something so much bigger than we are. Not just literal, not just physical, but it allows us to see there's more. There is something else. There is a spiritual context to it, without a question, because it didn't just happen. There's too many things there that disprove that concept. It didn't just happen. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can go look yourself. You can go right up Interstate 40. It'll take you all the way there. And go right into Flagstaff, go into Williams, go outside of Vegas, whichever side you want to go into, and you'll see. Jesus here is saying to them, just like the reality of walking up to the North Rim or South Rim or wherever it is that you go up to the Grand Canyon and say, why is this so hard for you to understand? It's right there. There's really no argument. And the only answer could be because you refuse to see it. You refuse to hear it. This is a massive problem right now. Yes, from a leadership perspective, certainly from a political perspective, because there's such great division in our land right now over which side you are aligned with. But friends, we're dealing with flawed human beings. So to align with either side in dogmatic fashion of my heels are dug in could cause error no matter which letter defines you in that perspective as far as that political alignment. That is why, again, being repetitive, I'll admit that, we go back to Psalm 118 and verse 8. Put your faith in God, not confidence in man. There's a reason. That's the center verse of the Bible. So Jesus is challenging once again this group, who again, we need to understand, these were not just simply political leaders that had a agenda or constituents that demanded that they be a certain way. These stepped into a higher realm than that. These were the religious leaders, the spiritual leaders of that time that were basically dictating to some degree what people should or shouldn't believe. And the Lord calls them out on it. Clearly calls them out. Now he's made reference on at least 2, possibly 3 occasions prior to this next verse of their father. And he never really specified that. We read between the lines and we knew exactly what he was talking about. But because he calls them out and says, you're not listening to me, so he steps it up. He steps it up a little bit more. And he finally lays it out. And in this next verse, he says, you are. So that's not speculative. That's not accusatory. That is flat out just stating it like it is. He said, you are of your father, the devil. So there he lays it out. He doesn't speculate anymore or assume anymore, or at least allowing them the opportunity to do either of those. Because again, every time he mentioned father before, they got all huffy and well, we come from Abraham, and I mean, God is our father. He said, no, let me spell it out for you. Let me make it very, very clear to you. You are of your father, the devil. Wow. What a statement. What a statement. What a powerful statement. And he says, and the lust of your father you will do. What is he stating here, friends? He's saying you've already, for lack of better terms, you've sold your soul. You've committed yourself to wickedness. You've committed yourself to evil. And it's got you. You're living there, heart, mind, and soul. You're shackled there. You're chained there. And while I have the key that can set you free, you refuse it. You don't want it because you've become comfortable in that place. Remember the verse prior to these? If you continue to live in the place where you are, it will kill you. You will die there. That's what he told him. He says here, the lust of your father, the desires, the erroneous ways, the wickedness, all the different things, the deception, the lies, all the different things that they were doing, trying to justify their actions. He said, that's what you're going to do. He was a murderer from the beginning. Oh, that's not what God said. That's not what God said. Go ahead and do it. And Adam and Eve died that day. They died that day. Not physically, but spiritually. It opened the door for a realm of wickedness and evil that had never been introduced to humanity before. He was a murderer from the beginning. He would create that mindset and spirit within Cain and Abel, with one brother losing his life. And he said he was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth. In other words, the truth wasn't in him. He was a liar because he believed in his own hype. He bought into the lie, as it would tell us later in the other letters from John, in 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, that if you tell yourself or convince yourself that you have no sin, you are a liar and lie to yourself. If you look in the mirror and say everything is perfect, you have no truth in you. That's what he's saying here. This was his problem. It was a pride issue, an attitude issue. And he said he didn't even live in the truth because there's no truth in him. For when he speaks a lie, he speaks of his own. He created it, for he is a liar and the father of it. So he's telling them here in a very clear and direct way. I mean, there's no question about that. You are of your father, the devil. He's naming names. He's putting it out there. And he says he was rotten from the start. And you're just like him. He has no truth. For he's a lie. He created lies. And you are following him very well. Now, one would argue, well, that's not a very nice thing to say. Sometimes truth is not nice. How we display sometimes things that are true, would I agree that some people could do it with a little more tact? Absolutely. In this particular case, though, that was not the issue. It wasn't Jesus being tactless. It wasn't him being harsh or cruel or anything else. No, he had to get the point across because, as was said in the prior verse, you're not listening. In other words, why don't you understand what it is I'm telling you? Why haven't you gotten it by now? Because you can't hear. So let me help you a little bit. The can't hear is you refuse. It's not the inability, the physical, medical. There was nothing there. It's a heart issue. And it continues to be right now. If you find yourself, and I say this from personal experience, but if you find yourself screaming at the television, asking, how can you not see this? How can you not hear this? Speaking to whatever it is, character, whatever personality, whatever is there, go back to this verse because they don't want to. And again, I'm not labeling anything, and I'm not calling out any one specific person or ideology or party or anything else, because it appears, at least at this moment, there's no exemptions. There's none. I mean, it is a bag of potatoes. And there might be red ones and purple ones and yellow ones and whatever, but they're all potatoes. When we find ourselves in that mindset or in that place of just being upset and discouraged and disappointed and again screaming at the television saying, why are you not hearing me? Why are you not understanding the truth? Go back and read this verse. Because they don't want to. It's a heart issue, my friends. While we equate hearing with our ears and the audible parts of our system and brain and whatever else that's in there working, it actually is a heart issue. We can have hearing issues. I have them. I've shared that before. We can get correction for that and hearing aids and cochlear implants and everything else. But regardless of how much we can or can't hear, literally, physically, and every other way, if we don't process what we hear through the processors of our heart, then we don't hear it because we don't want to. We're not listening to it because we've already made our mind up. It's going to be my way or no way. We see that happening a lot right now, and it's very dangerous because innocent people end up getting hurt. And remember, one of the 7 things that God hates is the shedding of innocent blood. So why do you not understand? Is it because you cannot hear? Or is it because you refuse to? It's a valid question. It really is. I hope that as we look at this, friends, again, you understand my heart. This is not about a chastisement or calling out anything or anybody. This is not only putting out what this scripture means, but is calling our attention to serious problems that we see going on right now and realizing they've been around for quite a while. And just like then and just like now, the answer remains the same. And the answer is singular. It's one answer, not many, one. Jesus. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.